Okay, Rachel, thank you for taking some time out of your busy Monday to sit down for this interview with me. I do appreciate it. So, first off, just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do for a living.
I am a criminal defense attorney. I've been practicing for about 10 years. I have my undergraduate degree in criminal justice, and after that, I went directly into law school. After law school, I worked for a collections firm for about a year down in Denver, and then got a job at the district attorney's office here in Fort Collins for a few years and left that for a variety of reasons. Did civil litigation um, in the defense world down in Denver again for about a year, and then came back to Fort Collins to start a criminal defense practice.
Okay, and at your time when you were working at the district attorney's office, what were some of the main differences or problems you saw there?
Differences compared to what?
Well, not so much in a legal sense. Let's just go with what were the, well, let's go with the main motivators of why you left.
Well, the reason I started, which I also think is very important, at the district attorney's office was because a family member was charged, when I was in law school, he was charged with a very, very, very serious felony offense. And while I was applying to jobs after I had taken the bar exam and had passed, I had a great deal of difficulty getting a job at the public defender's office in Colorado, where I thought I could do the most amount of good because I went to school in Wyoming. And so when that didn't pan out, I then went over to the district attorney's office, and at that time I thought I could do more good from the inside. It was apparent that the public defender's office wasn't a right fit for me if they were going to reject me because I didn't go to school in Colorado. I think that was problematic in and of itself. So was hired on at the district attorney's office. In the interview, one of the questions that the chief DA had asked me is, what is your job as, a district attorney? And my answer was, to uphold the law, but we had a lot of discretion. And so in that particular jurisdiction, we took an oath, we had a binder, there were certain sentencing guidelines, plea offer guidelines, and kind of took that for what it was. But over time, it became apparent that there were a lot more political interests at stake that did not necessarily, I did not necessarily agree with. I think there was too much emphasis on taking cases to trial that should not have gone to trial just for the benefit of going to trial. I also thought there was too much political oversight with respect to if you knew somebody that was higher up, then you were going to get a better offer. So for example, it had a father who appeared on behalf of his son, which was not okay. It wasn't kosher for a parent to do that if they were an adult defendant. And the son happened to be an NBA player and happened to have this wonderful NBA career. And a warrant was never issued for his failure to appear because he played for the NBA. And an offer that should have never been extended, given our guidelines, was extended because he played for the NBA. That coupled with just, other political things made me believe that the district attorney's office wasn't the right fit for me. And so I left.
Okay, do you feel that not so much about not so much about the whole government or the public sector per se, but do you actually feel that you can make more lasting or more better, if that's a good term, change from this end, from the private sector?
I think in the private sector, you make more of a change at the micro level. I think that you make more of a change individually with people, and they're more appreciative, and that is a currency in a lot of ways, that you do things for your client. You want to make them happy. You want to get them in the best position. In terms of a sweeping change, I do agree that in the private sector, we can be more vocal, but our voices are still muted because we're in the private sector. So, there's been several changes over the district attorney's, I shouldn't say at the district attorney's office, there's been several changes over at 8th Judicial District in terms of court settings, docket settings, how things are operating, and none of the defense bar has been involved in discussions about that. And, so we are unable to make sweeping changes procedurally, I think, at the county level. I will tell you that every year there's an effort by the Colorado Criminal Defense Bar at the state level to make sweeping changes with respect to statutes that simply do not work. So, for example, there's an assault, a second-degree assault statute that used to require mandatory prison time. So if you broke a guy's nose, you're looking at mandatory prison time for that. There's been changes in that respect, but it's been a hard road.
And what do you think it's been with that change, or with what you would see to be necessary changes, good improvements, for a positive kind of change? Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because of possibly maybe the bureaucratic structure of it all? Do you just think people are stubborn generally?
I think that individuals and state legislatures and the political action committees and the different lobbyists that push a lot of the agenda and get a lot of the laws that we have enacted, they have no understanding of how these laws actually work. None whatsoever. The second-degree assault statute is a classic example of that, where you can literally beat the shit out of your wife, black and blue, on her deathbed, but as long as you didn't break a bone, it's a misdemeanor. And, if we get down to an even more basic level of driving, you can have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 DUIs and still reinstate your license each and every time. But if you fail to get your if you fail to get your insurance, you fail to pay your child support, you have outstanding speeding tickets, you can't reinstate. And you're looking at very long jail sentences. So, those are two examples, and they're kind of at the polar opposite ends, but there's just a lack of understanding in terms of how things actually work. We see that at the more national level when we talk about incarceration rates. We talk about people who are in custody for very long periods of time for drug-related offenses. A lot of that doesn't make any sense, that we have these mandatory sentencing guidelines, and it's coming from people, I believe, who have no clue and no business setting those guidelines.
So you feel that possibly experience, hands-on, grassroots, maybe getting your hands dirty is actually very important to understanding.
Yes.
Okay. Also in that same kind of sense, maybe because I know you personally, now you have discussed in some private conversations with me a thought of maybe going back to public service, possibly as a judge sometime in your future. What's driving you back for that? You don't got to be too personal or too technical. Maybe I can ask it a different way. Is there something about the public sector, or is there something about being a judge?
I think what I've seen being on both sides of the fence as a district attorney and as a defense attorney, one of the things that draws me to being a judge, notwithstanding the craziness that you deal with on either side, right, in terms of clients and defendants and whatnot, there's always that political bullshit. People are always watching you. I think that's the optic through which politics is defined, right? We're always watching, we're always commenting. One of the things that draws me towards a judge position is the ability to push back a little bit, specifically on the district attorney's office. We see a lot of deference given to the district attorney's office that is not given to the defense bar. And, for example, late endorsement of witnesses, saying that you're trial ready when you're in fact not trial ready, granting continuances that should not be granted. binding over cases that should not be bound over. Now, that's not to say that you're doing it in the benefit of the DA's office all the time. But I think, especially here in Laramie County, if you look back at the most recent appointments, with the exception of the most recent appointment, which resulted in Susan Blanco, who is a criminal defense attorney, and Steve Gerard, I believe, who is a civil attorney. Historically, over the past 5 years or so, everyone that's been appointed, and I shouldn't say everyone, but the majority of them that have been appointed have come from the district attorney's office or from a prosecution background. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. But if that's all you know, then it makes it very difficult to hand out just sentences and decisions.
Okay, so let's maybe kind of take a tangent here. The thought of when you were working at the district attorney's office, what was the kind of just work environment? Was everybody kind of all the same team? Did too many people have their own personal motives? Was everybody kind of looking out for themselves? Or was the district attorney kind of, maybe I'm more trying to focus in on the role of the district attorney as the leader of the office when you were there?
Well, I can only speak to the district attorney's office here in this jurisdiction, and every district attorney's office is different, but there's quite a few similarities. Certainly in our office, we had the chief district attorney who really was out of it. You know, he was kind of the poster boy for the DA's office. He didn't really get involved in specific cases, but he was very much the mouthpiece for the office, and then you have his chiefs, and then we go into deputies. In county court, which is the only area in which I practiced when I was at the district attorney's office, and that's the only area I'll speak to, you know, we were all very young. And we were given a handbook, and I can attest that that handbook is still given. Certainly there's been some changes made to it, but it's still given out to the deputies. And I think that there's a fear of doing the right thing, and you subscribe to this belief that you're wearing the white hat, quote unquote, that's, you know, we're the white-hatted, you know, individuals who are doing good, we're on the right side of the law. And I remember coming down very harshly. Here in Colorado, you're required to sign the back of your registration, and if you fail to do so, it's like a Class 2 misdemeanor. And don't hold me to that, but there's a punitive sanction for that. So I was in, you know, 1A, which is a holding courtroom for those types of offenses, and a guy came in and he didn't sign the back of his registration, and I proceeded to prosecute him. That's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you kind of err on the side of caution, and the side of caution is not to defer to the rule of lenity and not to defer to the defendant, but instead to defer to the rule of law. And that's problematic when you're talking about a very young DA force that really has no life experience.
And on this same token, I mean, how much really, on that same thought, you know, you're kind of looking at objective and subjective responsibility. So much as what I'd like to be done in this situation, which, come on, he forgot to sign his card, versus what the law says. Do you see a lot of that? Do you still have a lot of difficulty with that balance?
Yes.
You do?
I don't right now.
But you do, coming from more of the defense side, which you'd always be kind of going.
Side, you know, what I tell my clients is, look, there's a difference between what they can prosecute and what they should prosecute. And the length of time with which the district attorney has been in this position will determine how easy we can get the result that we want to achieve. A younger district attorney is going to do what they think is right, and what they think is right is what they think their superiors want and what they see in the binder. So, you know, 9 times out of 10 when I see criminal cases come in, look, there's a lot of factual variations, there's a lot of different legal interpretations, but I think any well-seasoned criminal defense attorney will say, look, if you've got your criminal defense case, you've got your discovery packet, you've got to anticipate that the district attorney is going to rely on that wholeheartedly, right? And so it's really, at this point in my career, it's a job of really common sense. Does any of this make sense? And I think that's why we have the jury system, you know, not to get into a different tangent, but that's why we have a jury system, and that's how I present my cases to the district attorney. Do you really think you can push this through to a jury? Do you really think a jury is going to sit there with their binder and say, "Yeah, it qualifies. Here's what should happen"? No, it's a fact-based and it's a common sense-based approach.
And when you were over there with these, just with these maybe kind of difficult matters on exactly how to proceed and stuff like that, did you find yourself reaching out and asking other deputy district attorneys for
Sure.
their input?
Yeah,
So you were
absolutely.
always open to the thought of, and was that kind of the environment,
Yeah.
like the whole theme, like the district attorney your first day there, don't be afraid to ask for help?
We were always talking about cases.
Are there any other kind of lessons you've taken from your experience over in the private sector, just like in a sense of running this office, that you've noticed? I'm pretty sure you still have close relationships with some of your former peers and colleagues from over there.
Well, I always think it's a good idea to talk about a case with somebody who has no legal acumen whatsoever, because that's your juror, right?
Okay. Yeah.
It's a question, have I taken things?
Well, is there anything, more just not so much in a legal sense, not, but that maybe you learned some personal skills over there, like
From the DA's office.
from your time over at the DA office.
Keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut. Well, is there anything, you noticed from your time working for the private firms down in Colorado?
Keep your mouth shut.
Keep your mouth shut as well down there. And then were so vastly different from the private sector down there to the public sector did you notice a different kind of working environment from maybe that down in Denver you found they might have been more motivated by money and financial reward, while at the district attorney's office it was more of a sense of law?
Yeah,
Law
I
and
think
order.
that there is the career prosecutor that drives people. I certainly was not one of them. I respect a career prosecutor to the extent that they are very loyal to the cause, but that also causes me concern, right? Because they know nothing else.
So you think a broad kind of sense is just good, not in a legal sense. Would you say that's in every kind of career path?
Yes.
That you or in, and then did
I do not subscribe to the belief that you do one thing and you do it well to the extent that that's the only thing you know, right?
Okay.
If you grew up in a farm, all you grew is wheat, and all of a sudden there's no more wheat and you can't farm wheat anymore, it's probably not a good idea. You should be good at something, but you also need to be able to adapt. And I think that's the struggle that I had at the district attorney's office, is the lack of adaptation, the lack of, criminal law and civil law. I think last I heard, and this is not, do not quote me on this statistic, but I think only 3% of civil cases ever go to trial. A far greater percentage of criminal cases go to trial. But ultimately, you're still dealing with the same jury pool. And you're dealing with individuals who watch the news, who watch, Nancy Grace, who watch CSI, but they also have had encounters with law enforcement. They've had encounters where they think that it's fundamentally unfair for, a charge to come down. And so that's the optic which I really think, if you strip all the legalities away from it, doesn't make sense. And so, again, I know career prosecutors and I respect them. I know career public defenders. I respect them as well. I'm just not sure that is the best approach when you're looking at what route, you need to be well-rounded. And you can be a career prosecutor or public defender, but I think you need to have some other life experience from which to pull from.
Okay, and with all your experience, we'll take another kind of diversion here. What do you think is a great leader, or makes a great leader?
What is a great leader? Or
When you picture a great leader, we can just start there. Who's somebody you'd look up to, you would say is a leader? It could be a figure from the past, like an historical figure, or it could just be somebody known in life.
I think what makes a great leader is a great listener. And, I think that an example of that, not to get religious, but in terms of recent history, I think Pope Francis is a really good example of a great leader. I think he's somebody that's a listener, that is willing to hear other viewpoints, that more so than any politician is committed to a very historical and, gosh, I mean, it's been in existence longer than any type of law. I mean, if you're looking at a religious mandate, respecting that but adapting to that, I think you have to be able to listen. I think you have to be able to interpret. I think you have to be patient. But I think in recent history, if I were to draw from any source, I would probably say Pope Francis.
Okay, good. I can roll with that.
I will say one thing about Pope Francis: people who are not Catholics like Pope Francis.
Yeah, he does seem to have that.
That is a very that too is a good indicator of a good leader, somebody who's not like you and still respects you. They may not like everything you have to say, but they respect where you're coming from.
Okay, and what I discussed with you earlier, another thought of leadership, why I kind of chose to write this paper on you or interview you for it, was the thought of the leadership you exhibit every day with clients. Now, would you like to go into that? Maybe some of the thoughts, because my thought was that they look up to you for guidance, thought, because they need somebody to truly lead them through, whether it be a personal, just criminal. They have no idea what's going on, or maybe it's their third time. What are some of the things you've just noticed from that, like that you exhibit with different clients, maybe from different backgrounds and everything? Is there a common thread?
I don't care if my client is living under a bridge or is living in a multi-million-dollar home. My advice to them is always the same. I'm very honest with them in terms of whether or not I think they need legal counsel. I just had somebody in here the other day who ripped a flag down from the CSU game, and I said, save your money. Talk to the DA first. My job is to give them a roadmap. My job is to educate them. My job is to inform them in terms of what the evidence is, what the legal defenses are, but bring it back down to common sense. Ultimately, it's their decision in terms of what they want to do, but I try to give them my legal advice sprinkled with a hell of a lot of common sense, because there's financial considerations, there's collateral consequences with the DMV, with immigration, with licensing, with your children, and ultimately, at the end of the day, why in the hell are we doing this? So, if from a leadership perspective, I wouldn't consider myself a leader for my clients. I do think I guide my clients. And what I tell my clients is that, look, you've been charged with a crime, and it will guide you. It is not going to define you. But they do run the ship to the extent that constitutionally they get a say, and they make a lot of decisions. My job is to allow them to make an informed decision. And I have a lot of clients who come to me on probation revocations, parole revocations, who say, oh my God, I would have never taken this offer had I known this was going to happen. So I like to present different offers to my client, and I say, look, I don't think that you're going to do well on paper. I'm suggesting we close this out with jail. Or I'm suggesting that we avoid a temporary felony conviction because I think you're going to end up with a permanent felony conviction. So I don't see myself in a leader in the sense that, I'm not trying to change the world. But what I am trying to do is I want my clients at the end of the day and at the end of their case, not when they plead, but at the end of their case to say, I, client, made the right decision.
And do you think with your, I think you discussed at the start, you had a family member go through some legal drama, I guess if we could put it that way. Do you think that sense of empathy makes you more attractive? Do you bring that up ever in discussions with
I bring it up all the time.
Bring it up all the time. So kind of, do you feel that you being open and honest with them
Yes.
is important?
Yes, because I'm a human.
And that's just a human thing. That wouldn't be if you were doing anything else.
I think it's a disservice to tell somebody that you understand how they're feeling, and then you don't provide them with anecdotal evidence to support that. And a lot of people, unfortunately, yes, we did go through that. Unfortunately, yes, my brother was charged with rape. Mm-hmm. He came out of it, but I also know that affects him to this day. And so I know what it's like to have your brother call you from the jail. I get that. I know what it's like to have, your parents pull $30,000 out of a house to finance the fucking legal fees. I understand that. So I don't want to discount somebody's story when they come in and talk to me, because it is their life. And while I can appreciate, and I've been through something similar, I also understand that every story is unique.
And you've noticed that even from, here it's starting to become maybe more diverse culturally. Do you notice those maybe same appeals hold true across all cultures and ethnicities, if I can put it that way?
Yeah. I mean, in Fort Collins, it's very white. We call it Vanilla Valley. But you cut a person and they still bleed red. And I just, everybody can find a common thread regardless of where they come from or where they're going. And I don't necessarily change my approach with them based upon their culture, certainly not because of their ethnicity. One thing I do change my approach with clients on is, if I've got a 20-year-old smart-ass kid, I'm going to come down and talk to him like a 20-year-old smart-ass kid. I'm going to curse. I'm not going to use legalese. I'm going to talk to him like a person. So that is where I do change my approach based upon the age and the demeanor of whom I'm speaking with.
And on that thought of communication, maybe, and that would hold true in front of a judge. You're not going to be ever bluntly honest in front of a judge, would you?
Yeah.
I mean, well, in a legal sense, but
yeah. I had a sentencing in front of Judge Ecton, and I said, I informed my client, and of course, when we're quoting something from the record, yes, I have said fuck on the record, because I'm quoting the record.
Well, that would be twice now, I guess.
Yeah, well, and I said it on the record here, but
3 times, I think.
But if I had a client who was difficult, and I said, Your Honor, I'm not going to sit here and say that this report is a glowing report. I said, but I have informed my client that if he doesn't shape up, his butt's going to be kicked. I mean, I do think that
pure honesty.
The normal conversational tone gets a hell of a lot further, albeit you need to make sure it's respectful. But I think that carries with it more weight than the blah, 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 blah standard sentencing, dialogue.
So kind of personable, but, bluntly honest.
Right.
Okay.
If my client came back hot for cocaine, yeah, Your Honor, my client came back hot for cocaine.
Yeah.
We understand that. We acknowledge that. And here's what we're doing to fix that. Because if I say, oh, somebody stuck it up his nose, I look like an idiot. My client's going to go to jail. It just doesn't work.
Okay. And we got maybe 2 more topics here. I won't eat up all of your day. So where I wanted to go next was, where did I want to go next? Just a moment. And so a lot of what your job, I think, would entail from the criminal defense side would be negotiation, correct, with the district attorneys or with the district attorney's office.
I wouldn't say a lot,
but
yeah,
a good portion. How do you find yourself dealing with, do you find some of them to be more difficult than others?
Sure.
And how do you find yourself negotiating with those more difficult ones?
Time.
Just like softening them?
I think that one of the benefits to defendants is the more time that passes, we typically get a better plea deal. My approach has always been, and I'm very honest with my clients, if you want to hire somebody that's yelling and screaming at the DA, you're hiring the wrong person. I'm not going to do it. I do think that you need to take this human approach, and my approach is we're going to talk this out. I'd like to address the DAs with humor. I think that I have a good relationship with all of them. There is not a single DA over there that I just cannot speak to. That's not to say that they're all easy. But I can still find common ground with all of them.
Okay, so what I'm getting as a sense of your leadership theory is that you'd be part transactional, that there is a give and take, not so much a financial thing, but let's say take the personal relationship out of it that you and I have. And what is it? You're giving me information and I'm trying to learn from that. a transaction is taking place. There's also transformational leadership, which is the thought of relationship building, which might be more difficult for me to catch because we always had, you're my sister. So that kind of sense. But what do you think your more leadership style is? Are you a giver of, it can even be a financial, Ray doesn't have transactional, or do you try to build more personal relationships like we should do with the clients? That's why I kind of find it as a blend.
I think that my leadership style is more of a caring, and that may be going into the second part of that, because I am a fixer. I'm a problem solver. I think, with leaders, there's a fine line between a leader and a dictator.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, you don't want to tell people what to do. You want to guide people into what you think is the best solution, but ultimately, they make the decision, right?
Yeah.
So,
you want to lead them to make the right one, but...
Right, but they make the decision. And so there has to be deference. If you're talking about leadership overall, the assumption is that there's people that you're leading, right? And so you have to give them some power as well. And certainly the world that I live in and the world that I practice in is that is constitutionally given and gifted. And so while people say, well, I have the right to trial, what does that mean? I have a right to plead guilty. What does that mean? So really my job, I think, as a leader, I don't see myself as a leader, but if I have to be pigeonholed into that, it's just really more of an educator and a conversationalist. Let's talk about this. Let's explain this and figure it out.
Okay, and then just finally, you've talked about your work there with the, the State Bar Board, Defense Bar Board?
Well, I was asked to participate as the Criminal Defense Bar County Court Liaison with the Bench Bar Committee. It was not an appointment necessarily. It was to the extent that I'm on the board, but I'm basically the mouthpiece for the Criminal Defense Bar.
And would that also count for the public defenders?
No.
Just for private practice?
Actually, that's a really good idea. That's funny because the public defenders are not part of that meeting.
That could be a discussion for another time.
Yeah,
I thought
actually
that
not part of that meeting. But yeah,
would actually make
the district attorney is, but not the public defender. That's totally.
And I've noticed you also do some work with some local nonprofits around town. Would you like to speak any of those? Any of them you're certainly proud of? And just, I guess, after your answer, just one more, and then we can wrap this up.
I guess we are with the Realities for Children. We associate with them. They do a lot of really good work for children in need, who, really are in a bad position for a number of reasons. So they provide resources to them, to their families. So we've been a part of that for several years now. We're certainly open to help other individuals on a more broader scale, but we do a lot of pro bono work. We do a lot of reduced fee work for individuals who don't qualify for the public defender's office, or really should qualify, but for other reasons do not. My approach to kind of nonprofit work, I do think that it's more favorable for potential clients for me to help them on a one-on-one basis, as opposed to just writing a check every month. So, that's the approach that I've taken, and I try to do that quietly and not publicly, and that's how I'd like to proceed.
Yeah, and is it just for that reasoning that you actually feel, you personally, with the experience with the firm, with the resources you have at your disposal, can actually do better, do more good than giving a $500 check for a bunch of coffee at a fundraiser or something per se? Well, I think that will do it, Rachel. Anything else you'd like to add?
No.
Okay.
I mean, what's the purpose of all of that?
It's for class. Thank you for your time.